And we're live with another chat. I'm here with my man, formerly known as Shawn. I knew you I still know you, but back in high school as Shawn. But now I guess you go by Shawn or still Shawn, you said. But I'm super excited to talk to you because I've been following you. Like I sent you some topics beforehand and just like a little bit of what we were going to go over, but there's a lot of people that you know in high school, that you're in middle school to that extent, that you're very close with, and you spend a lot of time with. You're in school with them every single day, and then as years go on, you go to college and you just start living your life. You sort of like fall out of touch with people, but not because you want to, but it's just a byproduct of like your life. Things happen. So I think that was like sort of the case with you. I think we were very close in middle school. Throughout high school, life went on, and then I sort of like opened my eyes to your Instagram account and what you were doing like a couple of years ago, and it's just really like fascinating. So I really wanted to talk to you. We connected on Instagram a couple months ago, and I asked if you would do a chat. So outside of Kyle, people will learn that you're one of my biggest gets, one of the biggest fish that I'll have on this podcast. So if you just sort of want to like give a little rundown of maybe your experiences with me growing up and maybe just a quick little background, and then we'll get into it a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure, man. So first of all, it's awesome to be here. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor, honestly. I love chatting up with people and just doing new things, and especially reconnecting with an old high school friend, middle school friend it's even better. You can't beat it. So there's a level of comfort there you won't get with any other type of random conversation.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so I've been up to this, kind of the same old stuff you see on Instagram. As you were talking about earlier, high school, middle school was kind of I guess it was a strange time. You're trying to discover yourself. You're trying to understand what you're about. And honestly, I gotta tell you, we were cool in high school. I knew a lot of people in high school, and I was kind of one of those guys that was in and out of a lot of groups.
Mm-hmm.
I could hang out with the sports guys and,
smart people.
Yeah, exactly. I was listening to your podcast earlier with Tim, and nice. I remember him too. We had a lot of random classes together.
Mm-hmm.
And, so I would always be in and out of groups. I'd hang out with people like yourself. I'd hang out with even like Ray Rice. He was in a couple of my classes.
Of course, yeah.
I'd hang out with like super nerds. I'd be I was in the debate club. I also really ignorantly tried out for the basketball team, which is a disaster.
Nah, you had game, bro. Don't sell yourself short.
It was a terrible idea. And you first time you step on the court in your high school and you forget this is a class AA school.
Mm-hmm.
And you're trying to make the freshman team, and you're like, yeah, I'm not even good enough to get on this court. There's no chance that this is not happening,
I thought about that today. So I play a basketball run Wednesday mornings at my job, and like there's kids that are good. They're I don't know, 6'1", 6'2", and like they hit a jump shot pretty regularly. But like if you put them on the court with like standard D1, D2, D3 athlete, they're just average. And I made a comment to my friend. I was just like, there's so many good basketball players. It's ridiculous. And that's with any sport.
Yeah, actually, there's a funny little story. I was, when your show and Mount Vernon they had their big rivalry.
Huge rivalry.
They still do, as they still do.
Mm-hmm.
And for whatever reason, I think this might have been middle school maybe senior year middle school. For whatever reason, I ended up, I think, at an Isaac Mount Vernon basketball game.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I wasn't on the team or anything, but I ended up there early for whatever reason. And I remember seeing this massive dude on the court. And I'm just staring at him. I'm like, this guy's huge. Who is this guy? And he's wet from everywhere on the court.
Mm-hmm.
And he's dunking and he's sprinting. And I'm like, this guy. And I'm like, I'm talking to somebody. I said, oh, this guy's probably going to be like, maybe D3, D2. And do you know who that is? I was like, I don't know, who is that? Oh, it's Ben Gordon.
Yep.
And I'm just like, oh my God, this guy's going straight to UConn and going straight to the NBA.
And it was a beast.
And he was a beast until he signed that contract with the Pistons.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened, but me being a Bulls fan, I was over the moon that he got drafted by the Bulls.
Yep.
And then when he didn't re-sign with the Bulls, I gotta admit, I kind of gave up on him. I was like, oh, this guy, but whatever.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot of homegrown guys like that. That like Elton Brand was another Westchester guy. Ben Gordon. I can't think of any off the top. I mean, like Ray in football, but like there's always those homegrown guys that like you feel like that connection to. Like you saw him in middle school, and that's why, like in a weird way, like I like keeping in touch with people, and through these chats now are awesome. Like I'm very lucky that I have like a little bit of a platform. Like they'll, I don't know, maybe get like 400, 500 views or something like that. But the fact that like we had a connection in middle school, high school is something that like, was special back then. So it's like what changed, and like the fact that like you were open to talking again now is like super awesome. The fact that people are open to talking is so cool, because it's like you lose touch with people sometimes, and like you lose it forever, and it's just like you were awesome in middle school, so what is gonna not make you awesome now? Like,
yeah, I think that has a lot more to do with, a lot of people don't recognize that middle school, high school is a really developmental time for people, physically, mentally, and you really not. I personally don't believe you're really not who you're going to be for the rest of your life till you're in your late 20s, and even then, there's a lot of change, But I think the majority of your personality and your mentality is pretty much going to be what it is once you've hit your late 20s, because you've kind of been through some things that have shaped you as a person.
100%.
So whether it's getting married or having a kid like you, congratulations, by the way.
Thank you, brother.
And but high school, middle school, a lot of people fall out of touch. I think just frankly because it's just a lack of communication. You go to different colleges, you go to different universities. A lot of people don't come back home. A lot of people end up elsewhere. You're in Chicago now, and which is an awesome city. I love that.
It's great, yeah.
But you're in Chicago now. But I'm still in Westchester, not necessarily because I chose to stay, but it kind of just happened. But honestly, I think a lot of it is just chalked up to things just happening. It's just the way the balls fall sometimes.
100%.
Not necessarily you don't want to talk to people, you just don't.
Yeah, no, I agree. But something that I noticed with you, and maybe this translates into the person you are now, was back then, like, and maybe you won't agree with this or not, but something that I saw in you was like, there was always some confidence, like, with you, and like whether, like you said, it was hanging out with sports people or nerdy people or like whoever else you hung out with, there was always like a confidence to you. You're always happy and smiling, and like not. Like, it didn't seem like you were nervous to ever engage in a conversation or, like, talk to someone in the hallway. Like with me, like, we weren't the closest friends. I don't think we hung out at school that much. But, like, whenever you'd see me in the hallway, it'd be like, oh, what's up, Corin? And slap hands and talk for a second. Like, where and I know your background a little bit, like your Indian heritage. And I read somewhere, because I was creeping a little bit on, like, the Forbes 30 under 30, which is fucking amazing, and thanks, congratulations on that, and we'll get into that more. But it was saying that your parents immigrated from India, and you as well?
Yeah, so I was born in India, but I essentially, when I introduce myself to people and they ask where I'm from, I usually say born bred in New York, but the truth of the matter was I was born in India, but I came to the States when I was super young. I was probably I always get mixed answers from my parents, but under a year, 8-9 months old. So I was barely born in India, So, but you know what though, it does count me as a first generation immigrant.
Yeah,
it puts me in that category.
Is that something that, and like, I mean, I don't know your take on everything now, but like, is there almost some more pride that you take in it now with all the shit that's going on with Trump and the immigrants and like this, like?
I would say yes, but it's not something that's on the top of my head.
Okay.
I wouldn't say that it defines me either in business or in my social life, but if the conversation arises, it's an absolute, sticking point that I always say that, based on the current political climate, if my parents didn't have the ability to bring me over here, I would definitely not be the person I am. It's just a matter of fact.
Yep. Do you see it in your parents in any type of way? Do they like react strongly one way or the other on like the whole immigration thing, being that like they were maybe a little older?
Yeah, what's interesting though, because Indian culture is naturally and intuitively conservative.
Yeah,
it's just the way it is, But
India is very wealthy as like a country, right?
wealthy, you said?
Yeah, am I
I mean,
totally off by that?
well, so it's interesting. It's got some parallels to the U.S. in the sense that there's definitely a 1%,
Hmm.
but I would say that the 1% spread in India is even worse than it is in the U.S.
Oh, really?
I mean, I was just in India 4 months ago for a little bit of a, like a little tourist vacation,
Hmm.
with my wife and her family, and I noticed right away that if you have money in India, you have money. I mean, we're not talking about how in the U.S. where we live in Westchester County, it's a very wealthy suburb. Not that. I'm talking about extreme levels of wealth where we're talking about man and women servants and multiple drivers
Wow.
and courtyard looking type houses and castles. And then you drop down to the middle class, and the Indian middle class is probably our poverty level,
Hmm.
and then their poverty is, I mean, living in the gutter type level. So the
Wow.
spread is really ridiculous. So yeah, there's a lot of wealth in India, but the wealth is inbred,
Hmm.
for lack of a better term. It's you either have it or you don't, and you're not gonna get it. You're not gonna work for it. There's no American dream out there.
What is the like? And I mean, you've lived out here, but what was the maybe get into your parents' minds a little bit? Like, what's a mindset of like a young Indian kid growing up? Like, is the vision to, if it isn't to make a lot of money in India, is it to come to the U.S. and be successful here?
I'd say so. I'd say that 9 out of 10 kids in India, if you say, "Hey, do you want to go to New York?" they would pack their bags in a heartbeat.
Really?
Yeah, without a second thought.
Just because you grow up and you watch like Americanized TV shows and all that
I
stuff?
would say it's a combination of the American dream being really romanticized in third world countries. Although India is very developed and extremely successful as a country, in terms of the political and social climate, it's still very much third world. So how romanticized it is to have the American dream, get to New York, see the big buildings, have the freedom to move up the social hierarchy and economic hierarchy is very attractive to young Indians.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you see that at a lot of different countries. That's why people, want to come to us, because like there's opportunity to be super successful where you might not get there somewhere else. So, when your parents raised you, what type of culture did they raise you in? Was it religious? Like,
I would say that I wouldn't say it was religious. By birth, we're a Hindu family.
Okay.
But I wouldn't say that was ever pushed on me. It was definitely taught, and it was definitely used as a learning tool, and it was used as a way to discipline, for sure, in a positive way. But it was never something my parents ever said that, look, if you don't follow this religion, things aren't going to work out for you. Or if you don't follow this religion, X, Y, and Z is going to happen. It was never used as a tool to control or shape, I would say, my life. It was more so used as a track to guide me and say, we have morals, we have ethics, and this is the way we were taught. So you should probably listen. And if you're so inclined to take it seriously, then you're more than welcome to. If not, then just be a good person. That's really the way I was raised. I wouldn't say that that's typical of an Indian family.
That's what I was going to ask. Yeah.
Yeah, Indian families are quite conservative, and my mom and dad are not. They're not that conservative at all. They're quite modern. My mom came to the country. All she really had, she had an economics degree, which puts her quite far ahead of most Indian females coming to the country in the 80s. But she came with the ability to sew, so she was a seamstress.
Nice.
And my dad had a passion for videography and photography. He had a small movie theater in India that he left behind to come to the States. So, when he first came to the country, he had opened up a photography lab, and then he he moved his work to Soho in the city and worked for a color lab out there when film was still a big thing.
Nice.
So, I would say I was kind of raised on the American dream because my parents came with the ideals of we got to work to make it. And, lo and behold, my mom went from just, sewing clothes for our neighbors to make some money on the side to babysitting. And then she got a job as a teller in a bank. And now we're about 25 years later. And I always shout my mom out because she's a boss. She's the president and essentially the chief loan officer for a major bank in New York.
Damn, man, that's fucking awesome.
So she went out and killed it. My mom came out of nowhere, and you want to talk about American dream? It's her.
100%, and that's why I have so much appreciation for people who come from other countries and just fucking grind their ass off and will do some shitty, not shitty job, I didn't mean to say, seamstress is a respectable job and all this stuff, but it's hard work. You gotta use your hands and needles.
It is a shitty job because it's labor intensive, and if you didn't have to do it, you wouldn't.
Yep.
Similarly to the way the way that in this country right now, we always use the example of immigrants from Mexico. And then don't take this the wrong way. It's just lack of description. But who's going to mow the lawns? Realistically, who wants to do that, right? Who wants to be out there at 100 degrees mowing the lawn?
Or cleaning dishes or something like that.
Or for example, in the restaurant industry, for me, who really wants to be back there in the dish pit, as we call it, soaking wet 90% of your day? It's not fun. But someone will do it, and unfortunately, and fortunately, the people that will do it are the people with huge visions typically, and will say, look, I will do this for now to get to where I need to get to.
100%. And I'm sure you being an owner, you put a lot of, you can trust some of those people too that will do those jobs and are there every day doing that type of stuff, that you might give them some more responsibilities to do something else other than washing the dishes or something like that.
Well, for sure. I mean, I typically, when I typically hire somebody in a, what we call a porter position, which will be, a dishwasher or, a janitor type position, when I hire them, whether they speak English or not, whether they, they want to do this for the rest of their lives or not, I typically make it very clear to them that this is not the end of the road for you, at least when you're working with me, I came from nothing. I came from a small one-bedroom studio, a studio essentially with my parents and two young sisters, so 5 of us in the studio.
Wow.
On Webster Avenue in New Rochelle, to to owning a business and being relatively happy with where I am in my life. So I try and share that with as many people as possible. So when I'm hiring someone in that position, I constantly tell them, bust your ass now. And I promise you, if the opportunity arises and you're up for it and you're reliable, you're going to get the opportunity with me. I promise you that. And I got to admit, I would say 50% of the people that start off with me in one of those positions that's not necessarily as glamorous, they move up. I mean, right now, there's an example of a young girl that started with me who never ever worked in a restaurant in her life. And she came in for her interview. She was super nervous. And long story short, after a couple years of training and watching and doing all the grunt work, I mean, she's no longer with me now. She moved into another position. But, before she had left me, she essentially ran the business for me. And that all happened in a matter of 4 years. And, 4 years from bottom to top is quite a quick progression.
100, yep.
And what a lot of people, just as a side note, what a lot of people don't realize is that the restaurant industry, especially from the standpoint of being a server or being a manager, it's really underrated how much money you can make. People think, oh, you're a server, you're a waiter, oh, you manage a restaurant. But you'd be shocked if you don't have a degree or you don't have the opportunity to have a degree and you fall into that industry or you fall into a labor-intensive industry. There's far more money than people realize. I got to tell you, I have servers that were effectively making 6 figures if they worked enough hours.
Wow.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
That is mind-blowing. It's making me rethink what the hell I do right now, and I'm about to ask you for a job at the end of it.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. These guys and girls were putting in 70 hours a week.
Yeah.
And it is tough work. I mean, you're there from 9 in the morning to 1 a.m. sometimes.
Yeah, 100%.
But it's satisfying,
100%. Yeah, I mean, the reward at the end is probably super nice for them. But something I want to ask you, just going back to your childhood a little bit, what was your vision as a kid? Did you have any aspirations of something you wanted to be or do? Because did you see yourself owning a restaurant or doing something?
Yeah, so funny story was, going back to what you said to me about, I seemed like I had a lot of confidence. I gotta be honest with you, I had almost zero confidence in high school,
Couldn't tell.
Yeah,
Honestly.
I tried my best to hide it, but I was very confused as to where I wanted to be,
Hmm.
and who I was. Because similarly, it's nice being able to weave in and out of a lot of social circles, but it also, what people don't realize is what that does too is it also kind of puts you in a place where you're not really sure where you fit, because, I remember very vividly one day, I was hanging down by the smokestacks in Nearshore High School
Yeah.
on the bottom floor. And Nearshore High School's got this kind of interesting social system where certain people hang out in certain places.
100%. Yeah.
And I'm sure you know exactly what I'm
Yeah.
talking about.
Yep.
All the football players would hang out at one smokestack, and all the soccer players were hanging out at another smokestack.
There's an Italian wing and a Mexican wing. Yeah.
There's a Mexican wing, and there's there was the arts and music back down by the new wing,
Yes.
and they built it while we were over there.
Yep.
So, I remember one day vividly, I was hanging out with all the soccer players because I could pass for Mexican, and I'd be hanging out with the soccer players, and at the time in high school, I was dating a Spanish girl, and a Hispanic girl, and then I remember I was like, okay, I'm kind of bored. I'm gonna go hang out by the chemistry lab. That was my next class. I don't know if you were in that class with me, but
Might have been. I think we did have like a science class together.
yeah. So I remember I'm hanging out. I'm like, okay, I got to get to class, and then that area happened to be like kind of where all the Italians hung out. So then I'm hanging out with the Italians, and I'm talking to them, and they're telling me about X, Y, and Z, and a lot of them, would hang out in, or they lived in the north end of Nearshore, which is kind of like the nice part of Nearshore. So they're all telling me about this, like, they're all driving Acura TLs, and I'm like, oh man, like these guys are super cool, So, I would always like wonder, like, okay, where exactly do I fit? Which actually created a lack of confidence and created a lot of confusion as to where I wanted to be in life. Did I want to be like the cool Italian kids and get that Acura? So did I need to go to work? Or did I want to be athletic and be like the soccer players and the football players? And, I did have an aspiration actually, and I've got a funny short story about that. When I was in middle school in Isaac, and I was in 6th grade, I remember I made the basketball team, which was odd for me because I was not really that good. But somehow I managed to get on the team. And I'm sure I was like 3rd string, but regardless, I was on
You're selling yourself short. You were a fucking good basketball player.
Regardless, I'm on the team. And so I remember one of the first few games or something, I ended up scoring like 6 points. And I went 3 for 3, and I hit them back to back to back. And I don't know, do you remember Brian Torres and April McBride?
Yeah. Yes. Both of them. Yeah.
Okay. So they happened to be, I think it was almost tongue-in-cheek, but they happened to be losing their minds on the sidelines that this short Indian kid is just hitting shots from all over the court. And I remember just saying, man, how cool would that be if I could do that for a living, right? So you know where I'm going with this, and I'm saying, all right, I'm going to be a basketball player. I'm going to be the first Indian basketball player. And I put that in my head. And I go home and I tell my mom, I hit 3 shots, I had 6 points. They're actually going to post that up in the cafeteria because I scored, so I'm going to be on the printout. This is super cool. And I remember my mom looking at me and going, what are you, like 5'1"? You're not going to make the NBA. And everything just came crashing down.
Damn.
Yeah, and I still tell her that till this day. I'm like, Mom, I could have been the first NBA player from Indian descent, but you ruined it for me. But, that was, I think, the first memory I have of having an aspiration, as far-fetched and crazy as that was. And realistically, I ended up being like, 5'9", 5'10", so it would have happened regardless, even if I was the best. I mean, then again, Isaiah Thomas was a beast at one
There's
point.
plenty of guys, if you with the drive it seems like you have as a person and like the determination, if your mom loses some points now on this one, if she were to say you could do it, maybe right now you'd be my first NBAer on the podcast right now.
Man, that would have been something. But things work out, right?
I do respect the fact that at least, like, although you think it was you sort of being like it made you more insecure by channeling all these circles, I look at it almost as like, looking back on it now, I respect that a little bit more, that like you had the wherewithal and mindset to like try and figure out what exactly you wanted to be, and like it was like, let me test this out here, whereas like a lot of other people just stayed with their one circle, and to their like, I don't know the right word, discredit, not to their credit, but like now they're the same type of person they were in high school because they never explored and searched for any other things. Like that could almost be your blessing, is that you figured out so many things now.
I agree with you. Now that I look back on it, I think it was a huge blessing. And, there was another example of that. When we went to prom for high school, I remember very clearly saying that, look, I don't really want to have a date because I have a lot of friends and it's awkward. I'm not really dating anybody, so I don't really want to make it formal. So I decided to go with a bunch of people. We all went as a massive group, which a lot of people did, right? But
Yep.
I decided very clearly that at that moment I didn't want to be attached to a single person for prom. So when I got to prom, which I think our prom was at Copacabana.
Yeah.
Right? Do you remember that?
Yeah, 100%.
Prom at Copacabana, and I remember walking in, and I just had the time of my life because I literally didn't have to hang out with anybody I didn't want to. I could circle through so many different people. I hung out with the soccer kids.
Yep.
I went over to the football kids. I hung out with the Italians. I went over to all like the science kids. I went over to I was like, hopefully you can edit this out if you want, but the Juro kids, and hanging out with all the the arts and music kids. So I remember having the best time ever at prom because I was like, I didn't have to do anything except hang out with my friends.
Yep.
Meanwhile, everyone was like taking pictures and arm in arm with their girls, and I'm just like, it sucks for you. You guys got to dance with one person all night. I can dance with whoever I want.
Yeah. I totally agree. I mean, that's a great way to look at it. I think I went with Allie. I won't say her last name, Allie F. But like we had a good time. But like to your point, like it's sort of like you're handcuffed to your date the whole night, and when you could be going around just having an awesome time, which something that I wanted to ask you about in the beginning was before the podcast you had mentioned you were just coming back from the UK. Was it the UK?
Yeah, the UK. Yep.
The UK for an Indian style wedding, and something that like maybe this contributed to like your mindset of like just going with a lot of people and having more of a good grand old time is the whole concept of like an Indian wedding that like I wanted to ask you about and like what that experience is like, because like you mentioned at prom how you were just there having a great time with everybody, mingling with different circles. That's sort of my like I've seen, I guess, just maybe through movies or like TV shows, like an Indian style wedding, which is just almost just like a marathon of a wedding, and it's like
literally that's what it is.
So like what like can you walk me through it a little bit of like what the mindset behind it is like when you're planning one?
Yeah, so I can give you the background on a North Indian wedding, which is what my family is. We're North Indian. A North Indian wedding tends to be very lively. It's usually at least a week long.
Jesus.
My wedding was about a week long, but realistically it was more like 2 weeks, maybe even 3, because you have family flying in from all over the damn place. In Indian culture, weddings and children are essentially your two biggest moments in life, which it is in a lot of cultures, but in Indian culture it tends to be kind of, your wedding is really one of your peak moments, and having your kids are your peak moments. So for Indians, especially North Indians, when you're having a wedding, people come in from everywhere. So the festivities and like the feeling and the novelty starts to begin when people start coming in. So with my wedding, I had family flying in 3 weeks in advance to
wow.
go to, they wanted to go see Manhattan first, or they wanted to go do what they wanted to do. So you have a house full of people 3 weeks in advance of your wedding, so you're essentially starting everything up right away.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So essentially, the week of the wedding, I'll give you a little walkthrough. You've got essentially 3 pre-games, I guess you want to call them. You've got one night where you kind of do an in-house party where you invite your closest friends and family, and everyone's in your house. Your home is very centric to the wedding. It's a big part of the wedding. So your actual dwelling. So you have 20, 30, 40 people in your house, partying, drinking, eating, having a good time. There's usually music, lots of color like you see in the movies. Then the next night, it's kind of like you invade the girls' side, their parties. So you'll either go to their house or, a catering hall, wherever they're holding their event, their kind of party.
Yep.
And then the next night will be the guys' version of that again, where the girls' side will come and they'll invade the guys' side. And there's a lot of spectacle and, introductions. The girls' side is here and they're all like kind of doing fun stuff.
Well, let me just interrupt you for a second and ask a stupid question, because so my wedding, I got a lot of like low life friends. I've got some wealthy people that were at my wedding. But like, how the fuck can someone take off for 2-3 weeks, like a month?
No idea. It's crazy. Indian weddings, we sent out those cards like a year in advance.
Oh, like, so like, people got to clear the schedule.
Clear your schedule. You know, actually, hope I'm gonna send this out to one of my friends so he can hear that I shouted him out on this. One of my good friends from when before I was a full-blown entrepreneur and I had a corporate job, I made really good friends with a guy named Jared. And I had told him, I said, Jared, look, you're one of my first friends that I made outside of college, and I want you to be at every part of my wedding. You're in my groom's party. And he's like, awesome, dude, I'm there. So the poor guy couldn't get off for my bachelor party. You know, work just wouldn't give him off. No problem, no big deal. I said, but you got to be there for every part of the wedding. So for long story short, he couldn't take that many days off, and his company was essentially like, we're going to fire you if you keep taking this many days off.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So he missed essentially like I think 1 or 2 events, but the funny thing was all my other friends managed to make it. So nobody ever lets him live it down. They're all like, you're one of Shawn's first friends, and you couldn't make any of his wedding stuff, and we all like just met him, and we're all here.
That's still dedication, that to only miss 1, 2. I give Jared props.
Yeah, I do too. I pick on him a lot. Until this day, I still joke around with him, but I give him props. He came to almost, I would say, the vast majority of everything. But yeah, you know, so you know, back to the itinerary of an Indian wedding.
Yeah.
You know, so like, you know, the night before the wedding is kind of like the groom side's kind of big blowout event where the girl side comes over, and you know, you don't see your bride that night. You'll see her family though. So you'll see her family, her sisters, or whoever it may be, and they come and they you know, they tend to introduce you to people that might have flown in from the bride's side. So you have like kind of a really nice party. And then you've got the wedding, of course, which is Indian weddings, especially if they're religious weddings. They're quite long. You know, the ceremony takes about an hour, hour and a half, and it's usually uniting in front of, you know, similar to every other culture. So uniting in front of God or whatever you may have, the universe, whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
And then at my wedding, at least, usually there's a reception right after, which is, you know, in line with most weddings. So you do a reception, and then typically, if you're very very immersed in the culture, there's a secondary reception the day after the wedding.
Oh wow!
In which the groom welcomes the bride and her family into the family officially.
Okay.
So it's like, all right, we had all the parties, everyone's had a good time, but now you're mine.
Yeah.
So welcome to the family, and that tends to be like the first ever intimate event. So to put it in perspective, my wife and my wife's wedding and we had 700 people at the reception.
Jesus Christ, how do you know 700 people?
I didn't know who the hell these people were.
As long as they're all giving gifts. There were some people at my wedding, I was like, I don't know you, but you better have a motherfucking card in there.
Exactly. I had no idea who these people were. A lot of it is, you know, Indian weddings are a big moment for the families.
Yeah.
A lot of it is showing off. A lot of it is spectacle. A lot of it is my dad inviting everyone he's ever known. You know, my mom inviting a lot of people that she banks with or works with. You know, my wife's family is also extremely entrepreneurial, so my father-in-law knows freaking everybody you could possibly you could say a name, he probably knows them. You know, so he invite all these people, but
so is that an out of respect thing, or is that, to your point, like a just to like show off my son and his wife type of thing?
Yeah, it's both. It's a respect thing because Indian culture is heavily built on the idea of respect.
Okay.
So it's very much a respect thing in the sense that, oh, we've done business together, or we've broken bread together, or you've been to my home before, so you're invited to my daughter's wedding. You know, so it's that, and then also, of course, it's my daughter's wedding. Look what I can pull off. You know.
Yeah.
So it's that, and then you know, the reception the day after, which is the groom's welcome to the bride. You know, when we did that, I did that, and it gets relatively small. You know, that event was only 200 people. You know, so you know, so to go from 7 to 200 is quite a change in the guest list.
Yeah.
You know, so it's funny. You know, my wife and I still joke around about it. We you know, knock on wood, but we don't fight. The biggest fight we ever had was planning our wedding, getting that list down from 700
I give you so much credit, because like I guess, try to help my wife plan the wedding, which I think we had 100 or 150 people. And like, even then was like, my dad wanted to invite some guy that were like, does he even talk to that guy anymore? Or my mom wanted, and like, so the fact that like you just had like some mini fights or whatever over 700 plus people is like, I tip my hat to you on that, dude. Cause now is dancing a huge part of like the Indian culture? Like
massive, especially North Indian culture. I mean, it's really Indian culture in general. Mm-hmm. But if you ask anybody, you have any Indian friends, North Indians have a reputation to be a little wild.
Okay.
You know, so dancing is huge. Dancing is a major part of Indian weddings. Everything you see in those movies.
Exactly.
Like, oh, it's choreographed. Yeah, that actually happened.
Really? You know? So you guys, did you guys have to learn it? Like, did you learn to dance, or like, is it?
You know, so I didn't do one because, as crazy as it sounds, we just didn't have the time to do something like that. My wife and I did. My wife did one though.
Nice.
Yeah, she choreographed the dance with her sisters and cousins, and it was beautiful, and it was a lot of fun to watch. And we thought about it, me and my cousins and a couple of my friends, we thought about throwing together like a fun little dance, but we just didn't have the time to pull it together. But yeah, it does happen. It's not a joke. It happens.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I have other Indian friends, and I've seen some of the celebrations that they've been at, and like there is the whole dance where it's like they do like this, right, or something like that, or it's like,
yeah. It's called twisting the light bulb and petting the dog.
Okay.
So that's what, you know, any DJ that's at an Indian wedding, if he sees a ton of white people in the crowd, they love doing that. They love stopping everything and teaching you how to dance like an Indian guy or an Indian woman. So it's a lot of fun, honestly. I mean, when I was a kid, I would be so embarrassed by it. I'd be like, oh my God, we have the weirdest culture ever. But now I embrace it, and I'm just like, you know what? I'm so glad, because it's so different. You know?
Hell yeah, and it's a compliment that like the fact that like a DJ knows to pull that out to get people to do it, because a lot of people are gonna like dance to it because it's something that's fun. So like similar to me, like growing up with a whole bunch of Jewish weddings, is like you put someone on the chair and do it, and like or you'd stand in a circle and all like you're like have you like move around. Exactly, When I'm younger, I'm like, oh man, this girl's looking at me and I gotta do the Jewish dance right now. Like,
exactly, yeah.
But now I'm at a wedding and they pull that shit out with the chair and
hell yeah, I know what I'm doing.
Exactly. You're all like, you're the one teaching it.
Exactly.
So to transition back to, I sort of want to get into like your work a little bit, because you are super successful. As I mentioned before, you were on Forbes' top 30 under 30 list, which is amazing. So going from high school, like the tail end of high school, what did you ultimately decide on for college, like your original career path?
So, you know, I went the classic route of a subservient, submissive Indian son. You know, I immediately applied to med school.
Oh, wow.
And I did get into a pre-med program out in Long Island. I went with, I don't know if you remember, there was this kid, his name was Mike McWilliams. He was like a little Irish kid.
No, I don't remember Mike.
Okay, so him and I went to college together. We actually kind of planned it like that. We kind of said, okay, well, we both want to go to med school, and he is extremely smart, one of the smartest people I've ever met, period. Now he's a professor at Dartmouth, I believe.
Wow.
And he teaches some ridiculous genetic program, so that never changed. He stayed that smart, if not got smarter.
That's impressive.
Yeah, and so him and I planned to go to school together. My first year out there in Long Island, I remember I was taking, I think it was genetics actually, or something. It was something similar to that. And I remember learning about monkey hands, and I said, I don't want to do this. This is not interesting to me. I mean, it's fascinating, sure, you know. Yeah, all this is really interesting, but I really don't care that much. I'm not, you know, nothing is drawing me to save people's lives, as bad as that sounds. It's not interesting to me.
It wasn't for you.
Yeah, it wasn't for me. But what was interesting to me was, I always said to myself, you know, I wonder what people do when they don't have anything else to do. I kept saying that in my head. I'm like, what if I flunk out of college and I had literally nothing to do? What am I going to do? And in the back of my head, a voice just kept saying again and again, what's the worst thing that happens? You open a business? And then in my head, I kept saying, you know, that's not normal. I don't think a lot of people say that. You know, a lot of people say, I'll just get a job. But for me, I just kept saying, I'll just open a business. I didn't know what kind of business I was going to open. I didn't know why I was going to do that. But I just, in the back of my head, I said, okay, worst case, this doesn't work out, I'll open a business. And that's when it all started to kind of click and get together. So in my second semester out in Long Island, I told my roommate, I said, listen, man, this is not working out. I'm gonna drop out of this school, I'm going to transfer to something else. And he said, okay, well, good luck. I remember I had a little transitionary period where I did, CUNY Hunter.
Yeah, my father went to Hunter.
Yeah, so, I didn't really know what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I just quickly transferred into a CUNY because it was close to home.
Shout out to the Bronx.
Yep, that's it, right? And I said, all right, we're gonna go to school there. And I took a couple classes at Lehman down by the Reservoir in the Bronx. And in the meantime, I was working at a Verizon store, a cell phone store, as a salesperson, just to make money and get through school. And this lady walked in. This was in Larchmont. This lady walked in and said, hey, I need a cell phone. And I said, all right, no problem, I'll sell you a cell phone. And she handed me her ID because she said, oh, do I get a discount? And it was an Iona College ID. And I told her, I said, oh, I really wanted to go to Iona College, but I just never applied because it was an expensive school. And she said, well, why don't you apply? I'm the dean of admissions.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, shit, you're the dean of admissions? No way. And she's like, yeah. And I was like, but look, it's a Roman Catholic school. It's a private college. And, it's a D1 school. It's going to be expensive. I can't afford $40,000 a year. And
she's like, I'm also a billionaire, and I'll pay your tuition.
I wish. But she basically said, what she essentially said is, well, if your GPA is decent, I'll hook you up. Let's see what we can do for you.
Fuck.
So I had a decent GPA. It wasn't fantastic. It wasn't a 4.0, but I think it was like a 3.6 or 3.7. And I applied, and I literally remember her calling me and saying, listen, the deadline is literally now. It's today, and I don't have any of your paperwork. And I personally didn't drop any paperwork off because I didn't really take it too seriously. I didn't think I'd get in, and I didn't think I could afford it. So I remember her calling me and saying, I need your transcripts from Long Island. So I literally got in a car, drove out to Long Island, picked up the transcript, drove back to New Rochelle, dropped it off to her in hand, and then filled out an application in her office.
Damn.
With nothing else, no references, no referrals, no letters of recommendation, literally nothing. And she looked at it, stamped me as admitted, and then sent me off to the bursar's office. And I was like, oh, here we go. Now I'm going to get slammed with a $40,000 bill.
Yeah.
Little did I know, this woman, who I now consider probably one of the reasons I am where I am today, looked at my GPA and spoke to me for 5 or 10 minutes and said, walked me down to the bursar and said, this guy's got a lot of sales skill. I think he's going to be a really good businessman. We're going to push him through to the business school. Give him a scholarship.
What?
Yeah. So,
dude, this story is like fascinating. So this doesn't happen.
No, it doesn't. And I looked at her and I said, what do you mean I'm gonna get a scholarship? She's like, look, we have a couple scholarships that we still have to give out, and I think you'd be a good fit, so why don't we give you a scholarship? So I said, all right, that sounds good to me. Let's do it. So I remember not knowing how much the scholarship was gonna be, or what type of scholarship it was going to be, whether it was going to be work study or whatever. But I just remember going home and telling my mom, I'm going to go to Iona next semester, and I'm going to go on a scholarship. And she's like, yeah, bullshit. There's no way you got in today, and there's no way you got a scholarship today. And I was like, I'm telling you, Mom, I'm not lying to you. And she literally brushed me off like, he's just trying to impress me. There's no way he's getting into the school. And I'm not talking, we're talking about Iona like it's Harvard, but it's not that. It's an expensive school.
It's expensive, and it's a good school too. Don't sell it short. Yeah.
And their business program, Hagen School of Business, is like a top 30 now, which is ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless, a couple weeks later, we get a piece of mail in to our house, and by this time I had already signed up for classes. And once again, I had no bill. I didn't get a bill yet. I get a letter in the mail saying that I've got something like an 80% scholarship to the school. And it was, my mom actually opens the mail, being the nosy Indian mom that she was, and she goes, I can't believe you didn't lie to me. You're actually telling me the truth. I was like, absolutely. I actually got a scholarship to this school. So that's actually how I ended up at Iona, and I went to the Hagen School of Business.
Now let me ask you, do you because there's times where I'm not very religious, and I don't think about I like to think that I do, I'm a good person. I put out good karma, good things happen to me. Do you feel like there's some type of good, that doesn't just happen? There's something that has to happen for you to just look at her ID and be like, oh, I own a college, I was going to apply there, and spark up that conversation. Do you think there's something there?
Yeah, I do. I absolutely do. I wouldn't say I'm a religious person either. I'm not super super religious. I would call myself more spiritual, you know.
Same.
But I don't think for even a split second that there aren't forces that make things happen. I think that you have to be ignorant to not believe that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether it's you want to go the route of saying, you know, speaking in metaphysical terms, like, you know, oh, the universe this, the universe that. A lot of people talk that way. I do too. Or you want to go the route of karma and talk about good things happen to good people. I believe in that as well. But I do 100% believe that, you know, mentally and physically, your brain is so unbelievably powerful that if you do put things out there for yourself and say, look, I am going to be successful, I am going to do this, and you just, you know, I use a lot of sports analogies in my life. You know, if you have that rookie mentality and you just don't know what's good for you and you don't know what's bad for you, and you just take that shot and see what happens, you know, I do think things happen, you know. 100%. And for me in that situation, I remember very clearly saying to myself, you know, if it's meant to happen, it's going to happen. I'll get into a good school and I'll continue school and I'll figure out what's going on. And I remember when she walked in and she gave me her ID, I remember in the back of my head, I did very clearly say to myself, you know, maybe there's an opportunity here that she can help me out. And that's what ended up happening. And I just remember the only thing I said to myself, though, was if she's going to help me, I've got to stay on top of this. I've definitely got to follow up with her. And I've got to put out the vibes in the universe that I'm more than capable of handling getting into the school and getting through business school, and that I will be successful. So I think you have to honestly be kidding yourself if you don't believe that, you know, I'm not saying you have to believe in fate and destiny, but you do have to believe at some point that
some opportunity will present itself to you.
Something is going to present itself, and if you don't take advantage of it in that moment, it will be taken away from you.
100%. Yeah, you got to capitalize on the opportunities that are put in front of you, and you 100%. Like, that story just blew my mind, dude. Like, I hope you sold her like an iPhone fucking 20 before it even came out.
I actually have to admit that after she gave me that scholarship and after I got through school and everything, I unfortunately didn't keep up with her nearly as much as I should have. But I did run into her a couple times, and every time I did, I absolutely told her that she was the reason I am where I am. You know,
I mean, that must, like, she on your side of telling that story, she's got to be on her end saying, like, hey, look at this story, like, you know, and tells kids, like, hey, this was someone I found at, you know, like, selling phones at the Verizon store, and look where he is now. He's at the pinnacle of, like, owning restaurants and, like, managing people, and, like, she's got to feel some type of way too, which is amazing for her.
I'm sure, and, you know, I surely hope she does. And you know, the school, including New Rochelle High School, they do call me back to, you know, talk to kids, and
that's what I wanted to ask you about too.
And tell some stories here and there. So I do get the opportunity to tell that story and a multitude of other stories to, you know, to the people that I literally, you know, through literally the halls I walk through, you know. So it's been a fun ride so far. That
must be, like, amazing to do that, and we'll close on that when we get to that point of you know, you speaking and stuff like that. But, like, so from Iona now, when did you go to the BMW dealership, and when were you the finance manager there?
So I was working at the time. My dad had a small restaurant, and I was working in the restaurant as like a server, kind of busboy, because at that point I had been working at Verizon, and I was working at the restaurant to make ends meet and, you know, make some money for myself. And this guy had walked into the restaurant, and he had come for lunch, and he happened to be wearing a BMW, kind of like a sport jacket. And one of my passions is cars.
Yep.
I love vehicles, love cars, love talking about them.
If you check your Instagram, if you want to just Instagram plug, you've got a phenomenal car as it is, and I know you drive other cars as well. So if you want people to see your cars and check that out,
check me out at Shawn Nagpal on Instagram. You can see what I'm always up to, the cars and the fun stuff I get up to in a day. So
very fun stuff in a day.
Check it out, yeah. But
so he comes in with a sport coat.
Yeah, so he's wearing this jacket, and I remember just chatting him up and saying, hey, you know, I love BMWs, you know, it's one of my dream cars, you know, blah, 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 blah. And he basically said to me, hey, you know, what do you do? I said, I'm going to school for my MBA. And he said, you know, when you're done, I work over at BMW of Mamaroneck. I'm the sales manager over there. Actually, no, he was the general manager over there.
Wow.
And he said, you know, if you're ever interested in working, come over and interview, and if I can help you out, I'll help you out. And he became a regular at the restaurant, so I got to know him quite well. And I tend to take people at face value, and I also tend to be kind of a pit bull when it comes to when people say they're going to give me something or offer me something, I will go for it. I will not stop until I get what you told me you're giving me.
Yeah. So, hold people accountable.
Yeah. So he came through. I graduated. I gave him a call and I said, "Hey, Eric, can I come by for an interview?" And he said, "As a matter of fact, we're interviewing right now. Why don't you come by next week or whatever?" Came by, slam dunk interview. He already knew who I was, so I kind of had a shoe in. Which, going back to even the Iona story, honestly, man, if there's one thing I have learned, it is all about who you know.
100%. I agree with that.
If you don't know anybody, you will get nothing.
Yes.
So, I happened to know him. He put in a good word with the hiring managers. They hired me, and that's how I ended up at BMW.
And so your role there was finance manager, correct?
Yeah, so I grew into the role of finance manager. I started off like everyone else. I did a couple of basically like some gopher work, coffee runs, this and that.
Mm-hmm.
But I was the finance manager. So essentially what I did was I did credit. I guess for the general public, it's credit and risk.
Okay.
I would run credit for consumers, judge how credit worthy they were, run the finances for whatever they were purchasing.
Now, in my eyes, I feel like that would probably be easier than so I look at car dealerships in different aspects. So I have my wife has the Mazda 5 or whatever like that
right.
And then I have a Jeep Wrangler. So I've always just been in those type of dealerships where it's like a Jeep or Chevy, and the dealers, the salesmen that I've come across are just they just hire them off the street and they don't know anything about the cars, and they have just a bullshit spiel that they'll tell to you and you don't know what they're saying, and then eventually they'll call over the floor manager or whatever who knows the actual nuts and bolts.
Right.
Whereas I see a BMW, Mercedes dealership as salespeople as a little bit more sophisticated. They're more buttoned up. They know exactly what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And
so typically in that industry, there's levels to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a BMW dealership is typically considered a a high-end dealership.
Yep.
And then above that, you've kind of got what a lot of car salespeople aspire to, which is the exotics and almost consignment level vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you're talking about McLaren, Aston Martin, Ferraris, those type of levels.
Yes.
But regardless, so what you're talking about is you hit the nail on the head. Not that there's anything wrong with that. There's plenty of successful, if you want to call it, mainstream car dealer salespeople.
Yeah.
And they're making a lot of money doing it.
Yes.
But it does require a certain style of person to deal with that.
Yeah.
And the finance guy, to your point, usually would, it was a term we would use. It was called the box. That's when they would throw you in the box with the finance guy, and that's really where you get ripped off. That's really where your payment. Oh, I got a Jeep Wrangler for $399 a month, and then you walk out and you're paying $700 a month. And
yes.
What just happened?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That I would say really scared me off from working in a car dealership.
Yeah.
But I can happily say that on the higher end dealerships and the higher end brands, that's usually not how it works. My job was a lot more finance related. It was a lot more running numbers and understanding if this person could truly not afford the vehicle, but if what we were selling this vehicle for made sense to the dealership. We weren't losing money. We were making sure we were hitting our goals and targets. And then, of course, the consumer-facing end of it. Of course, there was definitely sales involved. When you come and sit down with me, I would always pitch you various warranties and protections.
Yeah.
But at that level, there's value in it.
100%.
Because
that's a good point.
An oil change on a BMW is not $30; it's $300.
Mm-hmm.
Or a tire on a BMW is not $100; it's $400.
Yeah.
So for people that are buying that level of vehicle, when you're buying a $100,000 7 Series, for example, if I told them, hey, I really suggest you buy this $2,000 protection plan for your wheels and tires,
it's worth it.
No brainer.
Yep.
But when you're pitching it on a $20,000 Toyota, that's 10% of the car.
Yes.
It's a much different situation, and
there's
a lot more pressure involved in that situation.
Yeah. No, 100%.
And not to mention, typically for me as the finance manager, the person that was across the table from me buying the vehicle typically earned quadruple what I made.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
You know, I was dealing with people that were making $500,000, $1 million sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So them buying their $80,000 BMW was a drop in the bucket.
100%. Yeah.
And I was honestly always enamored by them. I'd always say, screw the finance conversation. I want to know how you got to where you're at.
Yeah.
And that's where I made a lot of contacts, actually.
Yeah, I was gonna say, did you ever come across any like super successful people that like you just pick their brains outside of like cars?
Absolutely, absolutely. Mm-hmm. One of my closest friends and clients at the restaurant. I won't say his name for protection purposes, but he is actually the CFO of a Fortune 50 company.
Wow.
And I met him at the BMW dealership. He came in and he was talking to me, and we were just, you know, kind of chatting back and forth. He took a liking to me. He gave me his cell phone number, and he said, hey, if you ever have any questions about anything, just give me a call. And when I opened the restaurant, he was one of the people I invited to the grand opening. And since then, he's been a supporter. I cater his Thanksgiving Eve dinner every year. He has this stunning house.
I'm sure.
Where, you know what? You know how you can tell someone's really wealthy? And it's funny, but I just find it to be kind of nonsensical how much money this guy has.
Mm-hmm.
He has these super, super high-end German speakers that are made to look like plants in his house, so you can't tell that they're speakers. And I remember, like, I'm sitting in his house on Thanksgiving Eve catering for his party, and suddenly it's like this plant starts just screaming at me, and I'm just like, what the hell is going on? I'm like looking behind me, and I look at it and I'm like, hey, is that plant a speaker? And he's like, oh yeah, it's, you know, I don't even know the brand. It was some ridiculous German brand that probably cost like $9,000 a speaker.
100%.
Yeah, you know, and like it just goes to show there's levels to everything in life.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
And this guy was just on this ridiculous level where you have enough money to hide your speakers in plants. You know, you have these custom-made plant speakers in your house. You know.
Yeah, and that's something I want to ask you too, and we'll get into your businesses now, your restaurants, and like they're super successful, and obviously led you to a level that, like you said, you're comfortable, you're very happy with where you're at, but and we can get into this a little bit further, but first, can you just explain how you sort of transitioned into the restaurant business and to how that sort of took off?
Yeah, so real quick, my dad had a restaurant growing up.
Mm-hmm.
He was never really a big restaurant guy. He never really liked the industry. The reason he had the business was out of necessity. You know, I told you he was a photographer earlier. Yeah. Film kind of fell apart in the early 2000s and everything went digital. So he decided to get out of the industry. My mom, who at the time had not really taken off yet in her career, she was just getting there. She worked on the weekends as a hostess in an Indian restaurant in White Plains. It was kind of a high-end Indian restaurant. Her and at the time the manager, who I kind of came to know as an uncle, mm-hmm. because him and my dad were really good friends. And he told my mom, he said, you know, if your husband's ever interested, we could open a restaurant. I know what I'm doing. And my dad said, you know what, I kind of need to do something, because he had just gotten out of the photography industry. And my dad actually was in radiology back home in India.
Nice.
So he never recertified it back in America because it was too difficult at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, I'm not going to go back to med school. That makes no sense. So he said, okay, let's open a restaurant. So he opened a restaurant. So I knew the industry growing up. I grew up in it.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad, unfortunately, he decided to open a restaurant 2 years before the recession.
Oh.
So he opened it. It failed. It was successful for a little bit, but then the recession happened. It failed. And he told me he'd never, ever get into that industry ever again, because the margins were too slim and, you know, people were too difficult to deal with. So I still remember, and I tell the story to everybody, I was starting to recognize the end of my finance career. I started to recognize that it wasn't for me, and I wasn't enjoying being in the corporate world. Mm-hmm. And I said to my dad, hey, Dad, you know, I've saved up enough money. I think I want to open a restaurant. And he said, okay, take all the money you have, put it in a brown paper bag. I said, okay, then what? He said, okay, go put it in our driveway and light it on fire. I was like, what? Why would I do that? And he's like, well, because the return you're going to get from the restaurant industry is worse than you would get by lighting the money on fire. You'll get better returns.
So worse advice than your mom telling you can't make the MBA.
Yeah, exactly. And he's just like, you know, he was worried for me. He
basically, yeah, of course.
Said, why are you leaving
something so stable?
Yeah, stable, well-paying job. At that time, I was 23 years old, 24 years old. he's like, he's like, if you keep up with this, by the time you're 30, you're going to be killing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, but that's not what I want. So, I went and against his will and negotiated a lease in Larchmont, which for those of you listening is a small little European village in Westchester. And the reason I picked Larchmont is very simply because going back to Fate and Destiny, I worked there in the Verizon store. I just knew I knew the town, I knew the village. And I knew that British people love Indian food, because that's quite literally, if you didn't know, that's their national cuisine.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Curry is their national cuisine.
Huh.
It's literally all they eat. It's ridiculous. I guess, the conquest of India back in the day, they brought it back with them.
Okay.
So, I decided on Larchmont. I said, hey, look, this town this little village has a lot of British people. It will be a natural fit. So I negotiated a lease behind my dad's back. And the way he found out was he got a fax from the house, from the landlord, saying, we accept your terms.
Wow.
And he came to me with this fax and he said, what the hell did you do? And I was like, don't worry, you have nothing to do with this. I'm personally guaranteeing the lease. He's like, personally guaranteeing it with what? You live at home. And I was like, I don't know. But he took a personal guarantee from me. He said, what are you doing? You have no idea what you're doing. I was like, I'll figure it out. So you
weren't discouraged from his advice or anything like that from when he's...
No, I wasn't. Because you know what? I had supreme confidence in myself at that point. I said, if I can make it in the finance world, if I can make it through college, if I can make everything thus far, had no plan. It just happened.
Yeah.
So now what if I actually make a plan? Maybe I'll actually do good.
Yeah.
So I actually did that. I sat down, I made a business plan, my first ever 10-page business plan. My MBA actually kind of helped out with that for once. I made this massive business plan, and I will say the one major advantage I did have is that I had the money.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have to go to a bank for a loan. But that came with, a lot of hustle.
100%. Hard work, saving.
All those jobs I took up in college, and of course the support of my mom and dad. If it wasn't for them and me last minute borrowing money from them, I wouldn't have been able to open the restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
And I did. Mm-hmm. And honestly, Corin, I'm not going to even sugarcoat it. It just blew up overnight. It's the truth. I opened the restaurant the first day I had a line out the door. I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was the fact that it was the only Indian restaurant in the village, but keep in mind it's a 1 square mile village. So how many restaurants are there going to be?
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was that. I don't know if it was the hype of the Brits being really excited that their national food was now in town, or it was just a matter of maybe I just really planned it correctly. Maybe I did choose the right town. Maybe the demographics were perfect. My business plan was good.
Yeah, I would choose the latter, man.
I hope so. But, I had a line out the door from day one, and it's now 8 years later. And I literally, as I told you earlier, I had to leave the restaurant because the restaurant was so busy I wouldn't have been able to do this. It was just too loud in there,
Well, I really appreciate that because, for you to leave the restaurant, I thank you for that.
Of course, man. I'm still giddy that was me.
Yeah. Now you had mentioned earlier, and where we're from, Westchester, New York, is a fairly affluent area. It's about 20 minutes outside of New York City. There's a lot of money. There's a lot of good restaurants. There's a lot of different cultures and nationalities, and just a mix of everything there. With your restaurant and it being so successful now, is there almost a pressure to stay at a certain standard now that you
absolutely, man. Oh yeah, there is. I would say that the pressure, it's not bad pressure. It's not like people look at me and say, hey, you're 30 years old now, shouldn't you be a billionaire? It's not that. It's more so pressure that comes from myself, I would say. Succeeding with that kind of stroke of the combination of luck and hard work. They always say luck and hard work. When luck meets opportunity, I don't even know what the saying.
Yeah. No, I love that quote. It's luck is when preparation meets opportunity or something like that.
Right. With all that, when all that happened for me at 24 years old, and suddenly, I was 24 years old, and I'm looking at my business, and in the first, I think, 3 years, suddenly I'm looking at a multi-million-dollar business that I built with my initial investment of, I don't know, sub 6 figures, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, holy crap, did this really just happen? And then, you kind of internalize pressure because you say, okay, well, I didn't really expect that. So what's next? And I did that. I definitely pressured myself. I went ahead and I said, what's next? And the pressure did come. It started to come from not only myself, but then it started to come from, I would say, weirdly enough, once again, going back to a sports analogy, the media, which was so weird because I'm in this small little village in Westchester. What the hell does the media want to do with me? But Westchester Magazine, which is essentially kind of the biggest media in Westchester.
Yeah.
914 Inc., which is essentially the biggest business media in Westchester, suddenly started to reach out to me for interviews and reach out to me for, ad space and stuff, which I took out because I found value in it. But long story short, I started to notice that, all right, these people are starting to ask me like what I'm doing next, and I was like, okay, what am I doing next?
Yeah.
So I took it slow initially, and I said, okay, I'll just stick within what I have, and maybe I'll jar some of my sauces. Maybe I'll go that route. And I kind of didn't really want to do that. The FDA stuff and all that kind of annoyed me, and I was like, I don't want to deal with all this. So I just said, no, I'm not going to do that, even though I probably should have, but I didn't. Then I said, okay, what's next? Maybe I'll open a charity. I always wanted to give back. I tried to open a 503c, and I was like, this is so convoluted. They make this so difficult. I said, I'm not going to do that. Then I said, all right, what else should I do? Actually decided, all right, screw it. You know what? We'll open another restaurant. Well, that's the natural next step. Right?
Yeah.
Let's open another restaurant. So and at this point, my dad had become like my consultant, kind of my go-to. And I do have multiple mentors.
Yeah.
And I trust them all with my life. They've never guided me wrong. And I remember telling them, should I open another restaurant? And they all said no. They said, don't do it. You've got magic right now. You've got something good. Don't mess it up. Just figure out a way to expand what you're doing now without splitting yourself. I didn't see it that way, right? I said, no, I'm going to double myself. Wrong.
Yeah.
In my life, I went and opened another restaurant in White Plains, big city, which means big numbers, big money. But I also totally misread big expenses. I misread demographic. I miscalculated how much effort was going to go into being a big fish. I opened that restaurant across the street from the Ritz-Carlton. Suddenly, I had the CEO of the Ritz coming into my restaurant. I had big shots that I had mayors and politicians in my restaurant. I was at the time when I opened the restaurant, I was 27 years old.
Yeah.
I'm like, how do I measure up to these people?
There's big expectations.
This is hard, And that's when I decided. That's when I realized, like, oh my God, I pressured myself into something that I really didn't want to do.
Do you almost need a moment like that to make you like sort of appreciate the success you had at just when you had one?
Absolutely, you need that. You need that because it humbles you. It makes you realize that, and my father-in-law said it to me because at that point I had just gotten married. And my father-in-law said, you are so ambitious that sometimes you scare me. And I say, why? He says, you think you're going to open another restaurant, you're going to double your income, but all you're really going to do is double your headache, and you're going to split your income.
Yeah.
And he couldn't have been more correct. I mean, I tell my wife this now, and I said, I think that I accidentally depressed myself. I didn't realize what I was doing.
Yeah.
And I looked back at it, and now I was like 29 years old just last year, and I'm looking at myself, and I'm looking at the two restaurants, and I'm saying, wow, I went from being on top of the world, super happy with one restaurant, to having two and being absolutely miserable with myself,
It's sort of crazy how, that you can apply that to anything, which just like the more success you get is almost just like the more stress that builds and the more like
more money, more problems.
Exactly. 100%.
Listen, they weren't. Biggie wasn't wrong when he said it.
100%. Yeah. That's why. So it's almost like being at a level of success now with your restaurant and everything that you've seen with the second restaurant and like the guy from the BMW shop with the speaker in the plant, like. Yeah. How do you set a bar for yourself of like, I want to get here, but I also don't want to make it so I'm fucking going crazy, like where's that balance? You got to find a balance.
I think I just learned that balance, honestly. And I think it came through a really unexpected situation. It came into a situation where, having multiple restaurants, and at one point when I had the two, I even almost went for three. I had a meeting with a developer up in Stanford, which for those of you watching is a kind of a boom city right now on the East Coast.
Yeah.
You know, I went up to Stanford, and this guy was building this multi-million-dollar, you know, $100 million building, and he took over the post office in Stanford. And he was putting a brewery in there, which I thought was super cool.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, "Hey, I want you there. I want your brand there. I want you there." And I said, "Great." And he even offered to build it out for me. And I'm like, "Oh, it's happening." I was like, "This is it. It's happening. I'm gonna be, oh my God, I'm gonna be like the richest guy ever," you know.
Mm-hmm.
But for whatever reason, my gut just kept saying, "Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. You can't handle it." Because I already couldn't handle the two. It was already too much.
Yeah.
Because keep in mind, for just as a quick thing, my restaurants are full service. They're not Chipotle's. They're not.
Yeah, sit down whole.
Yeah, they're sit down full service restaurants. They're heavily reliant on quality.
And just say the name of it, because I know you're gonna have my stepfather, my mom are gonna be regulars now. My father wants to check it out.
They're called Coriander Modern Indian. They are upscale contemporary Indian restaurants with seasonal menus, craft beers, local wines. You know, handcrafted cocktails from mixologists. You know, I went and did the whole thing that no one has ever done with Indian cuisine before. So, you know, long story short, I already said it's so hard for me to handle two. How am I going to do three, you know?
Yeah.
You know, at that point with two, I had a staff upwards of 30, you know, and I had, you know, multiple vendors. I had a vendor list like 20 people long.
It's a lot to manage.
And it was all on me, you know what I mean? I didn't have partners. I have no partners, you know? It was just me, you know? And again, I'm 28 years old. I still want to go out. I still want to party. I still want to hang out with my friends.
Yeah.
I was just married to my beautiful wife, so I want to spend time with her.
Mm-hmm.
All that was really difficult. So I think really what ended up happening was unexpectedly, I remember one night sitting in the restaurant in the dark after we closed, and I said, "Man, if I could just get rid of one of these, I would, you know? And if I could just take what I've earned and put it into something that would earn me some passive income, I would so do that." And lo and behold, one of my really good friends, who's now probably, I've got a couple of best friends, and he's one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Lo and behold, he says to me, "Did you forget that I do real estate?" And I was like, "Yeah, I kind of did. You know, I'm not really paying attention to anything right now except for my misery, you know?"
Yeah.
And he said, "Look, man, you know what you really need to do is you need to focus. You need to figure out what's making you happy and what's not. And if you're really concerned about growing your wealth, there's other ways to do it. You don't have to kill yourself, you know?" And that's when it kind of clicked for me, and I said, "Wow, I want to build wealth," because that, you know, it's not everyone's goal, but in some way it's everyone's goal.
100%. Everybody wants to be successful and make a lot of money.
Yeah. And I said, "Look, I want to build wealth, but I don't want to kill myself doing it." And I realized I needed to strike a balance somehow. And that's when it hit me, and I said, I'm not happy, and I'm also not growing any wealth because I'm not happy.
Mm-hmm.
When you're not happy, you don't have new ideas.
Yeah, you lose your focus. I mean,
you don't have creativity anymore. You know, I mean, you know, once again, going back to the sports thing, you know, one of the best examples ever is one of my heroes and my most favorite athlete is Derrick Rose.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, the guy went through probably one of the most adverse careers of all time at this point.
Yeah, seriously.
And he had that 50-point game last year.
Yep, Minnesota.
Halloween. And I remember I was in a bar with my friends and my wife, and I get the ESPN alert that D Rose just dropped 50. And I remember literally throwing my beer in the air, and everyone's looking at me like, "Are you stupid? What did you just do?" I'm like, "My boy just dropped 50 points. Like, he's back, you know?"
Yeah.
But I always kind of, weirdly enough, ran a parallel with him, I felt like.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was like, all right, we hit super success at a young age. Guy hit MVP at 23 or whatever. And, you know, I had the restaurant. And then things kind of just didn't go the way I wanted them to. And didn't go for him that way either.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember reading something he wrote, or something that someone interviewed with him. And he said, you know, it got to the point where I was in my own head, you know, and I wasn't happy. And I looked at myself and I said, what's going to make me happy? And I said the same thing to myself. I said, what's going to make me happy? What's going to make you happy, Shawn? And I said, what would make me happy is going back to doing what I was doing, which was running my restaurant, coming up with new ideas, interacting with my guests, and giving back to the community. And I said the only way for me to do this is to get rid of one of these restaurants, and you know, start to divert my income into passive income sources. And that's what I did. I mean, it kind of happened overnight. You know, I kind of said, I woke up the next morning, I told my wife, look, it's over, I can't do this, you know, it's too much. I'm still young, and I'm acting like a 50-year-old that's been through like a corporate midlife crisis.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so she gave me the full support. I really didn't care what society thought. I didn't care what my family thought. I didn't care what what the magazines were going to say. After they did their giant exposés on me about, the youngest entrepreneur in Westchester, I didn't really care what they were going to say. I said, literally, I'm killing myself and I'm not happy. So what's the point? So I overnight decided, all right, call my landlord. Luckily, I had a great relationship with her. And I said, look, it's not working out. I'm out. She said, okay. I closed the one in White Plains because that was the one that was giving me stress.
Yeah.
I went back home to the OG in Larchmont. And honestly, man, I'm happier than ever. Of course, there's a lot more background to it. I took on with a partner and my brother-in-law as well. I took on a real estate portfolio. And I'm learning still the ins and outs of that. But I've taken on a couple of properties and et cetera, et cetera. So long story short, I've expanded now in a different direction, which allows me to focus on my passion, but also allows me to build wealth.
Yeah.
But it took, man, 4 years of.
Yeah, of course, man. I mean, and that's how you learn. And I give you a lot of credit, dude, because it's like, I would never put myself out there to even like try and go about learning how to fucking open a business or look into real estate. And like, I'm so impressed, like, with your story and like even hearing like the failure of that second restaurant. Well, not failure, it's a success that you even opened up a second restaurant. Like,
I always tell people, people say, well, did you close it because it didn't work out? And I always say, honestly, it was making me money. Mm-hmm. It just wasn't making me happy.
Yeah.
Typically in the restaurant industry, the first year is kind of the death sentence.
Yeah.
If you can't make it in that first year, you're gone.
Mm-hmm.
I was there for 5 years.
Yeah.
So we were good to go. You know what I mean? I was halfway through my lease. I was good to go.
Yeah.
I could have left it there forever, but it wasn't making me happy.
Yeah. And happiness is ultimately what you want to do. And it looks from your social and all this stuff now that it looks like you're at a place now where you're content with where you are. And like from that, I feel things just happen organically, like, yeah, and then like you'll get to a point where you'll be having so much fun with this restaurant now that it's almost just like, now I'm ready to do it this way. And I found the right guy who can run that restaurant. And like, and it just happens because you're having a good time. And like, goes back to you and Iona. And like, if you put yourself in a good position and just having a good time and there's no stress, you're not worrying about a ton of things, good things will happen. And like, where it's like, when you feel the outside pressure from other people, it's just like, you maybe push it a little bit too early and you reach for that moment when it's not there,
Absolutely. That's exactly what happened. You hit the nail on the head there. It's, I would say that, going back to what we were talking about earlier with the Forbes under 30 and the 914 Inc. under 30 stuff.
Yeah. Can you just talk about that a little bit? Because I mean, like that doesn't happen to a normal person.
Yeah. So that happened in a funny way. So what happened was when I had just the one restaurant, and as you said, when you're really happy, things just happen organically.
100%.
I was super, super happy. I was on top of the world. I felt like nothing could touch me. I felt invincible, as you do when you're 25 years old.
Of course, yeah.
Health is good. You're in the gym every day. You feel great.
Not a care.
Not a care in the world. And Forbes magazine, who I always looked at it as the holy grail of business.
Everyone should look at it.
Yeah, which it is. And I said, they came out with this summit, this conference, for the first time in history. And the under 30 list at that point had been an institution. I think it had been around for 4 or 5 years now. So I said, oh man, they're holding a conference. I wonder how I could get to that conference. And I found out the only way to get to that conference is you have to be on the list. Mm-hmm. But there was another way to get to that conference. The other way was to apply and say, hey, I'm smart. I'm an entrepreneur, I'd like to learn, and they would possibly extend you an invitation. So I applied, and they didn't extend me an invitation. They just straight up just ignored me. Mm-hmm. So I said, okay, I guess I'm not going to be able to go this year. I then found out there's a third way to get into this conference, which is to pay your way in. Mm-hmm. I said, okay, screw it, I'm going to pay my way in. I just need to go because I think that year was the first year, so it was quite a big event. It was it was in Philadelphia actually, and they had some huge speakers there. A couple of NBA players. They had Peter Thiel, who was a big angel investor. I think who else was there? Sarah Blakely, who is
Sounds familiar.
The founder of Spanx.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Women's like the under pantyhose type of
Yes.
situation. So a lot of big names, like people that you wouldn't have an opportunity to meet otherwise. I mean, these are billionaires, you know. I mean, billionaires.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, I gotta get there. Oh, Afrojack was there.
Nice.
You know, kind of cool.
Yeah.
So I said, I gotta get there. And I reach out to them and say, hey, I heard you can pay your way in from a corporate perspective. Yeah, you can buy a ticket. I was like, great, I want to buy a ticket. $5,000.
Damn.
Oh, okay, I can't. I'm not going to spend $5,000 to go to a conference in Philadelphia. So then I basically reapplied like 8 times, and I think they must have just got tired of seeing my name.
Persistence, man.
Yeah, and they sent me an invitation.
Wow.
And they said, hey, we'd like to invite you to the Under 30 conference. And I was over the moon. And then I got there, and they gave me this little badge that said Forbes Under 30. And I said to myself, man, this feels amazing. I'm not even on the list yet, but the fact that I'm here and I have this little tag that says Forbes Under 30, and I'm with this elite company, I'm with these 26-year-olds that built multi-million-dollar companies and, you know, finding cures to random diseases and doing all these crazy things. Keep in mind, Forbes is not just business; they also do other verticals.
Of course, yeah.
And they invited these medical geniuses. They invited tech geniuses. And I'm looking around the room and I'm saying, "Wow, I'm not the smartest person in the room. This is amazing. I love this." And then I set a goal. I said, "All right, I've got to make the list. And then, long story short, what I ended up doing was.
Let me just ask you, like when you made it to that conference, like. At first, it might have been like, oh my God, look at all these people. But did you ever have a moment that you were just like, he's a genius and he created this thing or whatever. But like, were you also just like, yeah, but he's a human being. Like, let me talk to him or something, you know, like.
Sure. There's a guy who does a great podcast called The School of Greatness. Lewis Howes. I don't know if you've listened.
No, I don't know.
It's an outstanding podcast. It's called The School of Greatness. Lewis Howes. He was there, and I remember listening to his podcast religiously. And I remember looking at him the first day of the conference, and he's like, you know, he's an Olympic handball player. And I remember looking at him, and I said, oh man, this guy's like your classic jock, 6'6", you know, handsome as hell, you know, jacked out of his mind. And on top of that, he's a business
mogul. Yeah.
And I'm like, man, like I'm never gonna get to meet this guy. And then I'm walking around the conference, and bang, there he is right in front of me. And so I said, screw it, I'm just going to walk up to him and say hi. And I forgot that, oh crap, we're an elite company. Everyone here is kind of on the same level. You know, there's really no one made it to this conference if you're not someone.
Yep.
You know? Or you're not, at least you're going to be someone.
Exactly.
And I said, okay, let me walk up to him. I walk up to him, and man, you would be shocked how many of these people are so humble. They don't see themselves as celebrities or special.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, definitely there are some people I've met that are just like, oh, my shit doesn't stink.
Yeah.
But they're not the people you want to learn from anyway.
100%.
You know,
and they're also the people that probably didn't grind their ass off to get where they are.
A lot of them are the ones that just got it from their dad.
100%.
And the ones like Lewis Howes and even Peter Thiel and Afrojack and a lot of these people, they were so humble. They were so damn humble. Sarah Blakely, the creator of Spanx, when she did her keynote speech, she was tripping over herself and laughing, and I was like, these people are just like me.
Yeah.
And what that does for you as an entrepreneur and as a person is it really instills a huge level of confidence in you, because it makes you realize that, look, I'm shaking hands with a guy that's worth more than 99% of people in the world. He could literally buy me and this convention center 1 billion times over, if not more. And he's just hanging out with us, you know, and he's just talking shit and asking me, you know, so what do you do? And I tell him, oh, I own a restaurant. And in my head, I'm saying I own one little dinky restaurant in this small little Westchester town. And he's like, oh, that's awesome. Restaurants are super hard. How do you do that?
Yeah.
I'm like, what do you mean? You're asking me for advice? You
yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I did have that moment, and it was mind blowing, because here I am sitting there saying, I want to get on the list, but I'm rubbing shoulders with billionaires. So really, what does this list really mean to me? It really didn't mean that much at that point.
I think we do something like in our own world every single day, and for us it becomes like, oh, I just, like I have my restaurant, it's successful, and yeah, it's, I mean, you know what it's like. You run a restaurant, you walk around, you talk to people, but like they don't know what it's like, like I don't, that's why I'm fascinated to hear your story, like even my wife, she works in HR, like she'll tell me like stories, of her, like a daily day for her, where for her it's just like, oh, this person came by and he said something to a woman, and like I'm like, that's amazing, like that's awesome, like what? So like to that guy, he's fascinated to hear your story. So like the fact that like you had the wherewithal to like tell him about it, and realize like, wow, he actually cares about what I do, is cool.
But that also makes you realize that a part of being successful and to attain extreme or extraordinary levels of success, you have to always be willing to understand that you don't know anything or you don't know everything. And that's something that I took away from a lot of my mentors and a lot of people that I've met through Forbes, is that one of my closest friends now, he's a finance guy. He made the list for finance. He was one of the most successful investors I've ever met. And he talks to me as if I'm like printing gold. Meanwhile, I'm looking at him and I'm saying, you're handling millions of dollars on a daily basis. I'm handling dirty plates and food. But our worlds are so different, and we appreciate that we don't understand each other's worlds, that it's always an exciting conversation, and it's always you're learning something new. And because of him and because of various other people I've met, that's actually how I ended up getting on the list, is that they got to know me, I got to know them, we struck up friendships, hopefully lifelong friendships with a lot of them. And a lot of celebrity chefs that I've met through Forbes, they got to know me, they came to my restaurant,
that's
they
awesome,
dined with me, and they said to me, oh, they would always introduce me because they met me at the conference. Oh, this is my friend Shawn, he's a chef restaurateur, and we met at the Forbes Under 30 conference. So they kind of just assumed I was on the list, but they didn't realize I wasn't. So then I remember I reached out to one of my friends who just recently opened a restaurant in Harlem, and you guys should check it out. It's called the Field Trip Harlem.
Field Trip?
Field Trip.
Oh, Trip. Okay, cool. That sounds like
just like when we were in school.
Yeah.
And he actually said to me, he goes, wait a second, I didn't realize you weren't on the list. And I was like, yeah, man, I didn't really make the list. And he's like, oh, well, okay, that's weird. You should have been on the list. And this was like 3 years ago or something like that. And then that year they released the list for Forbes, and lo and behold, there I am, at the top of the list for food and beverage entrepreneurs. And I reached out to him, like, did you do this? He goes, I didn't do anything. All I did was drop your name and say, do you guys realize that this guy he's spoken for you guys, he's been featured on Forbes, he's been at all the conferences, and you guys just didn't put him on the list. And I guess they realized it. And then they put me on the list there, and then I think in 2018, they put me on the list again. I don't know why, but they just did.
I don't know why stuff, dude. This is just like you're selling yourself short, because I'm sure you do an amazing job, and like, that's amazing. I mean, like that's something that I would just be like, I would have a T-shirt that I would wear under my suit every single day of just my face on that printout in the Forbes magazine. Like,
it's awesome, man. I gotta tell you, it is really truly one of those moments you're gonna remember for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
But in terms of actual return on that, honestly, I gotta tell you, the return on getting on the Forbes list isn't what you think it is. A lot of people, I had people calling in from, because Forbes has a habit of being dramatic in their write-ups, which they have to. They're a media company.
Of course.
And that's why they're successful. They really know how to make a spectacle out of things. And they throw, I think, some of the best conferences on the planet. They really, truly do. But, when they write things about you like multi-millionaire restaurateur Shawn Nagpal, and in my head I'm saying, that's not exactly the story. I'm not a multi-millionaire restaurateur. But the reason they say that is because, they go off your gross.
Yeah.
Things like that. So it's funny, right? You get family from India calling.
Oh.
Oh, we didn't know you're a multi-millionaire. And I'm saying that's not exactly what it is.
You get all those 700 people from your wedding actually paying a little bit more attention now.
Yeah, they're all saying like, yeah, why did we write you a check?
Yeah.
You know, so the return on it actually is kind of funny. It's double-edged. You know, it's on one end you get a ton of credibility. I mean, I got to tell you, partially the reason that, other than the fact that I have an outstanding partner and an outstanding brother-in-law to work with in real estate, and mother-in-law and family that all happen to be in the industry, other than the fact that I have an outstanding foundation to work with in real estate, you know, walking into a meeting with, you know, a potential investor and them seeing that you've been on the list, you don't have to even, you don't have to say anything.
100%. I mean,
the credibility's inbuilt.
100%. I say this all the time with comedians. I mean, like, you know, like the guy could have his worst night ever, but if you, like, I love Louis C.K. outside of all the like weird shit he was doing, but like even if he was having the worst night ever, I'm going into his show like already in my mind that he's gonna kill it, you know, that he's gonna make me laugh. So even if he's having a bad night, you still have that bar that's just like, you were on Forbes' list. Like, it's almost like he has to do such an incredibly bad job that like I'll have to just be like, wait, something was off, you know. So it's just like, you've impressed already so much that like you have this platform that's almost just like we trust you, you know. It's like, you know,
that's what it is. Yeah, like I said, it's the credibility, right? I mean, even today I met with the gentleman that's a major player in the real estate game in Westchester and in New York. I met with him not to do a deal, not to gain any business, but to learn.
Yeah.
And that's what I like to do. You know, I always feel that before you do a deal with someone, you need to get to know them.
Yep.
And they need to trust you. You need to trust them and make sure that there's a vibe. And if there is a vibe, then things will work out. And if there's not, they won't. So, you know, I went to meet with him. And, you know, once again, that credibility is already there because I was blessed to be essentially, recommended or referred by Forbes. You know, they essentially put their name behind me.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm a representative of them now. That he just jumped right to the cut. You know, he just basically said, look, I know you're good at what you do, so, you know, eventually we will do business together, but you know, blah 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 blah.
That's awesome.
You know, it is a double-edged sword in the sense that you get all that, right?
Yeah.
You get all that credibility, and you get tons of media attention, and it helps your businesses. I mean, Coriander took another big leap after that because suddenly I had other people that wanted to come. I had chefs that wanted to come and see what I was up to. I had, you know, media publications saying, we've got a young entrepreneur in our area. I had the high school reaching out to me and saying, can you come speak at graduation? We want to show you off.
It's awesome.
You know, so you get all the amazing things that you truly dream about that you will get.
Yeah.
But the negative side to it is that now suddenly you've got a lot of haters.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a lot of people saying, you know, did you buy your way into that? What did you have to do? Who did you have to suck up to? You know, or on the flip side, you get a lot of phonies that enter your life. You get a lot of people that say that suddenly that you didn't really know about, or people that you really didn't, I don't know how you would describe it, didn't really interact with too often.
Why do you think we're doing this podcast right now? No, I'm just kidding.
No, but you know, more from the perspective of, hey, can I come work with you?
Yeah.
Or can I, you know, I don't have much to offer. You know, I don't have coattails for you to ride, but they want to ride coattails.
It's funny how that works. Yeah, I've seen it working in the NBA like that, man. I believe stories of people like cousins and random people, like, to your point.
Exactly. You know, it's exactly that. You know, you suddenly you have people that are reaching out to you. I got to tell you the funniest thing. One of my friends said to me, who was on the list, I said, so what should I expect? His name is Michael. I said, Michael, what should I expect from getting on this list now? He said, expect your LinkedIn to have an obscene amount of connect requests, and every single one of them is going to message you with a business. And he hit the nail on the head. I mean, he was a prophet. My LinkedIn suddenly blew up at something like 200 new requests.
Jeez.
And every single one of them was, can I be your financial advisor? Can I be this? Can I do that? Hey, I have a business plan. Are you an investor? Can I take money from you? And I'm like, you know, the joke's on you guys. Come check out my bank account. You know, I don't need a financial advisor.
Yeah. I mean, you were a finance manager, but it's like, it almost is like, you should look at that as like a compliment, you know. And it's like, and I'm not saying you don't, but like, that it's just another chapter. You know, there's that chapter where you originally got the media and you felt the pressure to like open up another restaurant. Where now it's just like, this is the same chapter, just you know, presented to you in a different way. You know, so, and I'm sure you're ready and have been ready to face this head on as well. You know, like after the Forbes list thing. You know, it's like, I've been through all that shit already. So anything you guys have negative to say, like, I'm not even here for that, because like, I know how to weather that storm, and like, I'm just gonna keep doing what I'm doing. Like, look where it's gotten me, you know.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree.
Which I think it's awesome, and to sort of like put a bow tie on all this shit is just like, you seem like you're at a happy place now, and like you're very successful. Some of the hobbies that you've gotten into, I've seen like boxing and like your cars. Like, what are some stuff you're doing outside of the restaurant?
So outside of the restaurant, you know, man, you know, sports is one thing that is my release.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my wife is upstairs right now, and she'll probably laugh at me because after all this, I'm probably going to want to crack a beer. Sorry, my dog just jumped up.
No, I love it.
Here, Whiskey, say hi. That's
what up, Whiskey?
Look at that.
Oh my gosh, look at that dog.
So she will actually laugh at me because what I'll probably do is crack a beer after this and go turn on SportsCenter and just mind-numbingly stare at it for 2 hours.
Me and you both, brother.
Yeah, you know, and that's what I do. So sports, number one. You know, I'm a huge, die-hard basketball fan.
Yep.
I hate to admit it, but I'm a Bulls fan. You know, we are absolutely miserable, but I think we're gonna have a decent year this year. You know, we picked up some interesting stuff.
I've learned some good tidbits on the Bulls out here being in Chicago, and I've got some diehard friends out here too. That just the front office, similar to the Knicks, is just like a mess. You know.
I know. It's a mess. I mean, I hate to admit this publicly, but I did donate money to the Fire Garpax.
Oh, nice. I have a good friend, Ryan, that will be the happiest man on the earth to hear that you did that.
Yeah, I donated money to the Fire Garpax billboard on Reddit. Reddit raised that money, and I was like, hell yes, Fire Garpax. I hate them. But I have to admit, they draft well.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think they make good moves, but they draft well.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, man, other than being a giant diehard basketball fan, and I'll watch basketball any time of the day. I'll watch AAU, I'll watch college, I'll watch the NBA is my jam.
Yeah.
For me.
Talk about this speaking like engagements a little bit, and just like how rewarding it is to like talk to the youth or talk to people.
So actually, other than sports and, you know, boxing, which is a lot of fun, you know, I box a lot, and, you know, that kind of happened because my wife got on my ass a little bit. She said, come try out this cardio kickboxing class. I'm not doing this cardio bunny stuff. This is not Billy Blank type. I'm not doing this, you know. I went and I fell in love with it. I took up boxing and actually took it very seriously for almost a year and a half. I'm not as serious as I was before because I kind of don't want to get concussed anymore. Yeah, man.
I don't know if you heard about the dude recently.
Yeah, he died, unfortunately.
Crazy.
But yeah, boxing is a big love of mine. And then, because of that, actually, interestingly enough, you know, and of course the business stuff, but speaking is really, at the end of it, Corin, man, this is my ultimate goal. My ultimate goal after all said and done, and one of the first reasons I opened the restaurant, the why. They always ask every business man and woman, what's the why?
Mm-hmm.
What's the core reason of your existence? And for me, it's always been to show others that you can achieve what it is that you want to achieve, as long as you work towards it and as long as you put your heart and soul into it. And I opened the restaurant because I said, I can't tell people that they can achieve if I myself don't achieve. So one of my first things was I need to be so supremely successful that when I get up on a stage and I tell people, hey, look at me, I was this nerdy kind of, you know, didn't fit in, didn't really know where to fit in, not, you know, lacking confidence kid in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And now, you know, I've achieved, and hopefully when I do that, I've achieved extraordinarily. You know, I want to be able to do that for people. I want to be able to get on a stage, and I want to be able to say, look at me, I did it, and I didn't have the confidence to do it. So if you have the confidence now, and you put your efforts in, and you work hard, you are going to do so much more than even what I've done, and that's all I want for you, you know? And I had the opportunity to do that at Near High School at the senior graduation award ceremony, not the commencement.
Nice.
Yeah, I did that in conjunction with one of our, I don't know if you remember him, Daniel Bonet. He's now the head of the guidance center, actually.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Okay.
He's doing
Hispanic
phenomenal
dude.
things. Yeah, he's doing phenomenal things, and he is a great guy. And just recently had a kid as well.
Nice. Yeah.
And,
I think I'm friends with him on Facebook. Yeah, I see his stuff. Yeah.
yeah. And he linked me up and said, I want you to speak. And I went up there, and I think I killed it. I hope I did.
You killed it.
You know, I mean, man, that was one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. You know, seeing these kids getting their awards for already being successful, and me telling them that, man, I point blank told them, I said, you guys are getting awards for having 4.8 GPAs. You guys are way over the threshold of what's even allowed for success. So just keep doing what you're doing, and you guys are gonna be the next movers and shakers. You guys are the next game changers of the world, you know, and just don't let it go now, you know, because I see far too many kids that go from Nearshore High School to university, and then they just don't do anything.
Yeah.
You know, and the one of the worst things, I gotta tell you, one of the best and worst things about being back home in Westchester and having a restaurant locally is you see some people that you knew from high school, and you see all the good and you see all the bad.
Yeah.
Now, I see some people come in that I'm so happy to see them. You know, there's a contingent of like 3 to 4 kids from high school that still come to my restaurant all the time.
Nice. That's awesome.
And they're so successful, and they're so happy, and I'm so happy to see it, you know? And then sometimes when I'm driving to Neuro and I see some kids that are just still doing the same thing, and I'm just like, man, I just wish, and I almost look at them and I say it's not your fault, but I say I almost just wish you had the guidance that I lucked into or that I worked for.
Yeah.
Man, you know, sometimes you just get stuck, you know what I mean? Like,
you get stuck.
Mentality.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, you get stuck, but I mean, I look at it as like, I don't want to sound ignorant or whatnot, but it's just like they're not taking advantage of like situations. Like there's so much available to you being from Westchester, being from New Rochelle, and like I shit on other states and like other little small towns and all this stuff, but it's just like you can go to the Westchester Mall and run into the CEO of American Express, and like
Absolutely.
You can't be in Arkansas or some weird town and like it's just not gonna happen. Like there's so much opportunity where we're from that like I love when I hear like your story of like you being successful, and then like to your point I see other people and I'm just like, damn man, like it isn't your fault because maybe your parents were like, you know, whatever, but like it's sad because it's just like you want everyone to just grind and like be successful. Like
absolutely. You know, before we wrap it up, I was gonna say, you know, one of the biggest things that I attribute my success to is when we started this conversation, we talked about how I lacked the confidence because I was in and out of so many different social circles in high school. But looking back on it, like you said, I think that that's the reason I have what I have today, and I have the confidence, and I am the person I am today. But, you know, being in real estate now, right, it's funny. I talked to a couple of people on, you know, I was talking to somebody who was looking to invest in something in New Rochelle. And they said to me, you know, the only concern I have about investing in this property in New Rochelle is the school system. And I said, you know, let me tell you something. I actually grew up in New Rochelle.
Yeah.
I went all the way through. I went Barnard Pre-K. I went Columbus Kindergarten. I went Columbus Elementary. I went Isaac. I went New Rochelle High School. And then, of course, I ended up at Iona through my master's. So I'm like, if there's anyone that represents New Rochelle school systems, it's me. And I said to him, look, there's not a single other high school, I think, maybe in the U.S., I'm sure there is probably another one, but I think, from my experience, that is as big as a college, both physically and in terms of the student body. I mean, we have 1,000 graduating classes. We have a graduating class of 1,000 kids next year. You know, that has the size of a college, but the intimacy with the professors of a small university, a AA sports program, and on top of that, you can literally see the who's who from any walk of life. I mean, as funny as it sounds, right? And this kind of goes against investing in your shell, but I'm going to say it anyway, it's funny. While we were in high school, right, we had kids that would live on the north end on the border of Scarsdale where their parents were multimillionaires and they were coming to school in your shell. You can learn from them, you can get to know them, you can go to their amazing mansions and hang out and barbecue at their house. And we also had, you know, a stabbing on North Ave the same year. and that was from a totally different social circle. And in between, you had the footballers, and you had the jocks, and you had the average kids, and you had the goths, and you had, the Hispanic kids, and you had the Arabic kids. You literally have a microcosm of the United States
100%.
in high school. And if you're telling me that's not good enough for your kid, then your kid's just not good enough for your show. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's like they should take that snippet out and like put that on New Rochelle's like homepage, like their city homepage or something. I couldn't agree with you 1,000% more. Like I still to this day love the fact. I mean, it sucks for the teacher, but that like one of the students got up to the teacher and straight put her up to the blackboard, and like the security guard needed to come in there and break it up, because it's like, you don't see that at like a all like preppy school or something like that. You need to see a fight or something.
And dude, that you won't see that down the street at Iona Prep.
No.
It's not gonna happen.
No.
And on the flip side, our rival school, Mount Vernon, they don't have the other end of it, right?
No.
They don't have the
wealth,
the wealth,
yeah,
and the high end of the social circle.
Yeah.
So New Rochelle High School, honestly, it made me who I am.
Yep.
And even when I did the keynote at the graduation, I said, it's because of the professors and the teachers and the principals.
It's a melting pot.
It's a melting pot of everything, and it's because of. And I still, I don't know if you remember him, Mr. Gurney.
Of course.
Yeah, I still see him all the damn time.
Nice.
And this guy still has not visited my restaurant, and I'm like, dude, I took entrepreneurship, and you haven't come to my restaurant.
That's a slap in the face, Gurney.
And I literally told him, like, that's a massive slap in the face.
Yeah.
And the worst part is he goes to my rival restaurant in New Rochelle because he's gone, and his excuse is I've been going there for years. I'm like, all right, come down to Larchmont, which is a mile away, and actually support your student.
He'll be there. He'll be there.
I'm sure he'll be. After this, I'm gonna send this to him and be like, I called you out.
Awesome.
All right. Yeah.
So will we see you? Because Kyle wants to be on there too. Because I don't know if you've been following Kyle, but Kyle's successful on the political spectrum of like YouTube. He was upset he's not on the Wall of Fame. Are you gonna be up there?
I better be.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I better be.
I think like Kyle's my boy and you're my boy too. You both need to be up there. So whoever's in charge of that shit needs to like.
Yeah, cool. I think you need to send over an email to the new principal and let him know.
I think he used to work, like, because my brother's a teacher at Edgemont, and I think the principal used to work at Edgemont or something like that. So if it's the principal that's in charge, they need to take down some of those old bozo farts that like haven't done anything and put some new blood up there.
They need to.
By
the way, Ray Rice is the coach now, right?
Is he the head coach or
the head? I think he's an assistant.
Oh yeah, that I knew. Yeah, and I'm happy for him, man, because like people outside of New Rochelle, like they have their whole thoughts and just like they made up their mind on Ray, and the whole elevator incident was terrible. It was a terrible incident.
Yeah, inexcusable.
Yeah, of course. But like Ray, unlike some of these other athletes, and I say this every time because I've met Ray, we know Ray, like he made the situation, better after the fact. He's done speaking events and he's learned about domestic violence. He married his wife, and it's like he became a better person because of it. Yeah, so like,
and not to mention that his wife, stood by him through the whole thing, and they came together. To me, there couldn't have been, other than him obviously going back to play football, there couldn't have been a better ending to the story,
100%. So just wrapping it up on this, what's next for you? Like, just continue with the restaurant and like just see where it goes?
Yeah, definitely continuing to always improve the restaurant. Every season we change our menus and things like that. It's always fun. So I'm always constantly improving in the restaurant.
I'm excited to check it when I'm back in New York. And like I said, I know my stepfather, my mother will be there. My father's going to be there. So you got 4 new customers there. My dad and his stepwife.
Love hearing it. So, of course, always improving on the restaurant. I've got some, I got to say, I can't say it now, but I've got some really big stuff in the works right now. It's not restaurant related, but it's huge.
Nice.
It's huge. So I can't say anything till we're all done with it. But I'll tell you one thing. If it takes off as much as I expect it to, I'll come back on the podcast and I'll drop in a little announcement about it. So.
Open invite, dude.
But it is so I've got something big in the works. It's a little bit more investment related, and it goes down the alley of what I talked about earlier about giving back and inspiring the youth and others to achieve what they're totally and absolutely capable of. One thing that you'll always see on my Instagram, and one thing that everyone always hears me say, is that it's a Will Smith quote, actually. And he said it, I think, on a late night show. Someone once asked him, and they said, how do you describe greatness, or what would you say greatness is, and how come you achieved it and so many other people haven't? And he always says that greatness is not this one-off esoteric thing that only one person or a few people can actually achieve. It's something that every single person has. You just have to go do it, and you just have to understand that you have it within you, and it needs to be honed. It definitely needs to be brought out of you. It's very difficult to bring out in yourself. It is very difficult.
Yeah.
It needs to be honed. It needs to be brought out in you, and it needs to be nurtured. But if it is, man, literally there are 7 billion people on this planet that can do something amazing.
100%.
And if they all did it, wow.
Yeah.
It's I guess that's why it's called greatness, because it's that hard to achieve, right? So
yeah. Only few find. I mean, not few, but only a rare amount of people find it. And
yeah, and that's what my next project is. It's centered around bringing that out of people.
It's awesome.
And there's some tangible parts to that too. So.
That's awesome. I'm excited to hear about it when you do release more information. Like I said, there's an open invite for you. And one thing that I will just compliment you on, like just hearing your story, because I've never heard it. I've just seen it. One thing that I'm really impressed by, not that you should care what I'm impressed by or whatnot, but like,
no, stop.
I think it's awesome that like you seem like you're always open to just listening too. It's not always just like, hey, I own this restaurant, here's where we're at, this is why we're successful. Like, you are willing, it seems like, to like hear what other people have to say and like take those tidbits, and that contributes to your success. So like,
I appreciate you telling me that, but I'll say that I can't take credit for that. I'll tell you what, I learned that through reading a book, and I suggest everybody to read it. It's a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. Or my title might be the other way around. It might be How to Influence People and Win Friends. Those, but regardless, it's a classic business book. Anyone in business has either heard about it or has read it, but not enough people actually execute on what the book says. And quite literally, that book says the only way to win people over in your life, and the only way to succeed in life in general, is to let other people talk. And everyone inherently loves talking about themselves. It's just human nature. But if you actually stop and just say, so tell me about you, tell me about why you did this podcast, why are you doing this, and even Corin, I'm also interested to learn about you. I always see you on basketball courts and interviewing random people, and repping your Knicks gear. I don't know how you get away with it in Chicago, but doing all that you do, you'd be shocked how much people are willing to divulge, and how much people just sometimes want to talk. They just want to tell people, this 100%. Is what I'm up to, you know?
Yeah.
And that's how you win people over, and that's how you gain friendships, and that's how you gain business relationships. And I personally think even today, that's why I went over to that gentleman I told you about. First thing I did when I sat down, he said, tell me about yourself, Shawn. I said, actually, you know what? I want to learn about you. How did you get to where you are? And that's how we started the conversation. And I believe, when you do that with people, they leave the conversation saying, not only did I learn about him, but he learned about me.
Yeah.
Now it's become mutual. It wasn't one-sided. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's a great point, man. And that's awesome advice, and that's awesome tidbits for people, because, you're a walking success. So
thanks, man. I appreciate that.
I hope we keep in touch. I'm going to make a strong effort to still keep in touch with you, and just keep lines of communication open, because I appreciate you doing this, and this was a lot of fun. I'm excited
it's mutual, man. I definitely want to keep in touch. And just for everyone that listens to the podcast, I just want you all to know this all started because I went to basically just roast Corin for being a Knicks fan after the draft, and after everything that happened this summer with the Knicks and them not
this summer, since I've been a freaking 1-year-old.
But it's true. But I do want to admit, I did make a mistake. I went to roast you and say, you got nobody, you didn't get Zion, but you guys had a good off season. It's really under the radar. I think it's a good off season.
I don't want to hear any positive Knicks news stories, nothing. I see these tweets of like over under 35, 40 wins. Until they prove something, the Knicks will get no fucking like.
I think that's fair. I don't think they've earned respect from anybody in a long time, and I think that the whole Dolan situation is ridiculous. But everyone should know that if you ever want to get on his podcast, just DM him and say the Knicks are terrible, and that'll probably set him off, and maybe you have a conversation. But
I'm happy you did that, dude.
Yeah, I'm happy too, because now when this podcast blows up, I'm gonna be able to tell that story. Oh yeah, you know that famous podcast guy, Corin? Yeah, I got on it because I went to roast the Knicks.
Yeah, right. Well, I appreciate it a lot, dude. Like I said, I'll be keeping in touch, and I'll be following you on Instagram and keeping up with you, dude, because this was a lot of fun. And I'll put this in the description, but like, not to shit on all the other conversations I had, but I really, really enjoyed this conversation, and this was like one of my top conversations because I think you have a lot of insightful tidbits and a very interesting story, and I enjoyed this a lot, man. So thanks.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, and I got to tell you, this is my first podcast, and
you did amazing. Well, your public speaking career is proving dividends right now.
I appreciate it. I loved it, man, and you're going to kill it, and I just wish you nothing but the best, and we'll keep in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you, dude.
All right, dude. Well, have a good night.
Appreciate it, brother.
Later.